we're heading up to $1 trillion in debt. It's a different circumstance than last time, isn't it? I know you're someone who's always had a problem with large government debt in Australia. Don't you think it's time for a bit of a different approach? Let's get rid of the pork barrelling here.
The government has decided and embarked on a strategy of growing our way out of debt, and part of the way you do that is invest in infrastructure, and you seek to grow the economy harder and faster. It appears that the economy is rebounding out of COVID well. Unemployment is hitting new lows. It's lower than at the start of the pandemic. Growth is higher. The alternative is to raise taxes to tax your way out of debt, and the government does not want to do that. In fact, they've got a pointed difference with the Labor Party on delivering a lower tax, higher growth strategy that delivers jobs. So I think everyone in Tasmania, where they've had higher rates of unemployment, would welcome that, and they would welcome the expenditure that the Morrison government has delivered into their seats.
All right. Well, Ben Oquist, it sounds like it's time for some Keynesian economic theory. What do you think whoever gets elected will do in terms of reining in debt, or is this the new normal, this sort of situation? High deficit, high debt for a few years until this pandemic is completely behind us, because, of course, this is the scare campaign against Labor, and it's not like Labor doesn't have form here when you look at their policies from the last election.
Yeah, I think the political orthodoxy has changed on debt as it's caught up with economic orthodoxy in Australia and around the world. And we probably had a bit of a debt and deficit obsession in Australia that didn't match the economic situation or the economic reality. And, you know, whether you're in the United States or the United Kingdom, where surpluses haven't been delivered since, Clinton or Blair, you realise that chasing surpluses is politically risky and economically unsound. And David's right. Better to get back, if you want to get the deficit under control, do it by growth. And I do think if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's taught us the reality that Keynesian economics works. I don't think the government is going to have an easy time prosecuting a debt and deficit scare campaign on Labor, having run up a big and well-warranted debt. I'm not sure, though, that David's right about voters being slightly more cynical about pork barrelling. And we had some analysis out showing, I think Braddon was number 2 on national discretionary grant programs rewarded under the coalition government. In fact, 3 of the top 7 seats were all in Tasmania, which underscores the importance of Tasmania in this election, doesn't it? And I think it's been understood, a lot of focus on Queensland, whereas really Tasmania is just as important. And if the coalition holds on to Braddon and Bass and wins back Lyons, as they're targeting to do, that will make it very difficult for Labor. They're really 3 critical seats. But I think pork barrelling can go too far for the electorate. And interestingly, the other electorate next door to Braddon is Bass. And Bridget Archer has made a name for herself and made her more popular in the electorate by prosecuting the case for a federal ICAC with teeth, and of course famously crossed the floor. And I think that demonstrates there's a bit of a new appetite for voters who are concerned about excessive pork barrelling, the lack of integrity in spending, and potential corruption that is at least a possibility, if not definite, at the federal level, when we've seen federal state ICACs uncovering it at state level. And I think the government does have a problem there with integrity and issues, having not put in place an ICAC, and Bridget from Tasmania crossing the floor underscores that.
Well, let's see
Andrew,
if that actually plays in Bass, because I'm not sure it will. Sorry, David, you want to say something?
I did want to say, because you did touch on something, and debt and deficit's not something you want. I don't think anyone wanted the pandemic that forced a lot of that expenditure that has got us into the fiscal position where we are currently facing. But had there not been that expenditure, I think most sensible economists say there wouldn't be economy to save. We would have gone into a deep recession, if not a depression. The thing I think that is important about that is that you do want to have, particularly underscored by what's happening in the world, evidence today. where global markets are going to go into shock. We're looking at higher inflation numbers and possibly higher interest rates flowing through. There's a realignment, coming in terms of the world order if Russia is successful in what they're doing. You do want to have economic management come to the fore, and I think you're going to see that debate starting to play out over the next 10, 12, 15 weeks whenever the election's going to be occurring.
Indeed. Well, let me just get a yes-no answer from both of you, gentlemen, because we're nearly out of time. Michael Kroger said on another panel last week that should Russia invade Ukraine, he said to Stephen Conroy, watch the polls tighten. Will that event lead to that occurring? Yes or no, gentlemen? First, David.
Most certainly.
And Ben?
If it does, it doesn't necessarily mean it's long-lasting.
Thank you both for your time.
The bottom 20% get nothing. They're really unfair tax cuts.
People want to see much stronger action from the government when it comes to climate change.
It's no coincidence that we have a wages crisis in Australia.
Transitioning to net zero emissions, it doesn't seem like there's much room for gas.